All right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating today. We're going to unpack a document called the Full 360 Sovereign Manual. Now, to be clear, our goal isn't to prove or disprove its claims. We're here to do one thing: neutrally explain the incredibly detailed, step-by-step procedure it lays out. We'll use slides that show its core concepts and trace the path it describes, from its basic philosophy all the way to a final tax filing.
So here's the roadmap the manual takes us on. We'll start with the foundational idea, the why behind it all. Then we get into the nuts and bolts, building a special kind of trust, officially changing your legal status, doing some unique financial calculations, and finally filing to get those credits back. Let's kick things off with the big idea that everything else is built on.
Okay, first things first. We have to understand the core philosophy here. According to the manual, this is the entire reason that every single step that comes after is, well, necessary.
At the very heart of this manual is this one fundamental split. On one side, it says most of us operate as a public debtor. It equates this to being a decedent, kind of like a deceased estate that's subject to commercial law. The whole point of the process is to transform yourself into a private sovereign, a living person whose entire estate is protected inside a private trust, away from public liabilities.
This quote from the manual pretty much says it all, doesn't it? The entire strategy revolves around this one move, shifting your status from what it calls a descendant to a non-descendant. This is presented as the master key that unlocks everything else, insulating your property and getting you out of certain contracts.
So with that philosophy in mind, the manual gets down to business. The first major practical step is to construct what it calls the mandatory jurisdictional vessel.
And the manual is incredibly specific about this. The foundation for this whole thing has to be a revocable living trust, but it redefines this common tool. It's not just for estate planning, it's seen as a sovereign private entity designed to operate completely outside, the normal public zone of commerce. And before you can even think about drafting any legal documents, the manual insists that you have to gather these three things, and you need 3 copies of each: certified copies of your birth certificate, your social security card, and a government ID.
Once you have those papers, the manual lays out this exact 5-step protocol. You have to draft the trust agreement, get a specific type of EIN from the IRS, name a trustee, and then, crucially, get it notarized and officially recorded with the county.
And here's a perfect example of the incredible level of detail in this manual. It's not just about what you do, it's exactly how you do it. I mean, get this. It requires you to use purple ink for every signature and to sign in this very specific first, middle, last format. Okay, so the trust is built. Now what? The next phase is all about communication. It's about formally notifying government agencies that you've corrected your status to non-descendant.
So what exactly is a non-descendant in this world? Well, the manual defines it as your formal declaration that you are a living soul, and because of that, you're not a deceased entity that's, quote, lost at sea and subject to maritime law.
This part of the process demands what the manual calls surgical precision, and you can see why. Look at these instructions for IRS Form 56. It's telling you exactly which boxes to check, what to write, and even to use your 18th birthday as a key date, with the legal phrase non pro tunc, which kind of means now for then.
Then, all of these pieces, the documents, the carefully filled out forms, the purple ink signatures, get bundled together into a very specific 10-page package. The manual then tells you to fax this entire dossier to the IRS and mail similar packages to state officials.
So now the whole process takes a sharp turn from legal paperwork into finance. This third stage is all about figuring out the value of what the manual calls signature credits and then reporting them. The manual uses its own special term for this whole financial process: barter. It defines this as the way you exchange the value of money that's linked to your signature in order to reclaim credits. So how in the world does it say you should calculate this value? Well, there's a specific formula. For things like monthly bills, you take the monthly payment and multiply it by 12. For huge loans, like a mortgage, you just use the entire loan principal. The user is told to get a full year of statements to do all this math.
But here's where the math gets really interesting. This is the crucial step. After you've totaled up all those yearly payments or loan amounts, the manual says you have to apply a 10 times multiplier to the whole thing. This 10x factor is absolutely key to its entire method.
And here is another one of those mission-critical technical details for the reporting part. The manual is very clear. On the 1099-B forms, the user's social security number has to be put in the QSIP field. The manual says this is how you identify the SSN itself as the actual security being bartered.
And that brings us to the grand finale. This is the last stage in the manual's process. It's where everything, the trust, the status change, all those financial calculations, comes together in one final, crucial tax filing.
Okay, so the final filing is done on a Form 1041, which is the U.S. tax return for estates and trusts. And you probably guessed it, the manual provides another super specific protocol, telling you exactly how to label your data, what numbers to carry over from other forms, the whole shebang.
Now, of all the specific instructions in this entire manual, this one might just be the most striking. It directs the person filing to claim a fuel tax credit and to enter this precise figure, $30,000. Not a penny more, not a penny less. Exactly $30,000.
So after all this complex work, what's the intended result? It's what the manual calls the green dollar amount. This is defined as the final refund that gets issued to the trust, which is supposed to represent the complete 360-degree reclamation of all those credits you calculated. And just to make sure not a single detail was missed, the manual gives you this final validation checklist. It really hammers home all the points it sees as absolutely non-negotiable. The purple link, that signature format, the 10x multiplier, the exact credit amounts. The message is crystal clear. You have to follow the procedure with absolute perfection. So there you have it. We've just walked, step by step, through the procedure laid out in the full 360-degree Sovereign Manual. Our goal wasn't to judge it, but simply to observe this incredibly detailed structure it presents. And it leaves us with a pretty interesting question to think about. What does this kind of rigorous, almost ritualistic, rule-based system tell us about the search for alternative paths within the complex legal and financial systems that shape all of our lives?